If you don't listen to me, we're getting a divorce. I'd rather divorce a husband who says such selfish things, I declared, my voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and resolve. He shot me a smug smile, unaware of what was about to unfold. My name is Emily. I'm 35 and have been married for 5 years, living just with my husband. Although I've longed for children, we haven't been blessed yet. We discussed fertility treatments, but in the end, my husband was against them. He believed in leaving things to nature. If we can't have children, it's still a life worth living, just the two of us, he said once, easing my mind, at least for a while. After we got married, both of my husband's parents passed away one after the other, leaving us no time to think about treatments. My husband is quite dominant, a trait that showed even more after we were married. At work, where he was once my senior, he would call me his foolish wife in front of relatives and scold me harshly for the smallest mistakes. It was a continuation of the power dynamic we had before marriage, one I had hoped would soften over time, but it didn't. It might sound like my husband is heartless, but he wasn't always like this. When I worked under him, he gave me good advice, guiding me when I stumbled. He also appreciated my efforts, and when my beloved grandfather passed away, it was my husband who comforted me. It was during those difficult days that we began dating, and eventually, we got married. After the wedding, I left my job and became a full-time housewife. Every evening is the same. Hey, Emily, I'm home, he calls out, coming through the door well past 9 p.m. He's always late, his managerial position keeping him in the office with overtime hours. Welcome home, I respond with a smile, though inside I feel the weight of the routine. He doesn't respond much, just heads straight to the sofa, taking off his shirt and socks. I gather them up as I ask, "You're late again tonight. You must be exhausted." But he says nothing, just sits there, silent as always. He must be really tired, I tell myself, convincing my heart that this is just how things are. I prepare dinner, and when it's ready, he eats quickly, still not saying a word. Once he's done, in about 10 minutes, he heads to the bathroom. I lay out a towel and fresh clothes for him, clean up the dishes, and when he comes out of the bath, he heads directly to bed. My husband has always been a man of few words, but lately those few words feel like they're disappearing entirely. But I wonder if my husband's recent promotion has been wearing him down. For the past year, our conversations have become fewer and fewer, yet despite the silence between us, I still trust and love him. He stood by me during my most difficult moments, and that's something I will never forget. I lost my father when I was in middle school, and just a few years later, during my freshman year of high school, my mother passed away too. After that, my grandfather took me in and raised me as if I were his own daughter. He was warm, kind, and I adored him deeply. My goal was to repay him for everything he did for me. When I began working, I saved up as much as I could to take him on trips and share special meals together. Those memories are some of the happiest of my life. I wish he could stay healthy and energetic forever. But just 3 years after I started working, my grandfather was diagnosed with lung cancer. He passed away soon after, and I was left completely alone. I knew eventually we would part ways, but it happened too soon. There were so many more things I wanted to do for him, more time I wish we could have shared. His death left me heartbroken, and I spent many nights crying myself to sleep. The person who noticed my sorrow was my boss at the time, now my husband. He listened to me with genuine care, telling me, "You've been through so much, and you did well." For a man who was usually stern and intimidating at work, he showed me such tenderness when I needed it most. I was incredibly lucky to have him as my boss back then, and it was during those moments I saw the kindness in him. I know, deep down, he's a good man. That's why, despite everything, I still want to be the kind of wife who supports him. One afternoon on my day off, the house phone rang. "Hello," I answered. "Hey, Emily, it's me," came the voice of my husband's younger brother. "Oh, long time no see. What's up?" "I need to talk to my brother. Is he around?" "Sure. Hold on a second." I called out to my husband, who was lounging in the living room. "You have a phone call," I said, but as usual, there was no response. Without a word, he stood up and took the phone. "Hello. Hey, how are you? What's going on?" His face, which had been expressionless just moments ago, lit up with a smile as he talked to his brother. My brother-in-law is 15 years younger than my husband, and perhaps because of the large age gap, my husband dotes on him endlessly. I had heard that my brother-in-law was living a blissful life with his beautiful wife, whom he married 2 years ago, so I was surprised when my husband's tone suddenly shifted. Ah, really? Are you okay? His voice became serious. I wondered what was happening on the other end of the line. Well, if you're ever in trouble, just let me know, okay? I'm your big brother after all, he added before hanging up the phone. What happened? Is something wrong? I asked, sensing the weight of the conversation. My brother, he's been laid off, my husband replied, looking downcast. What? Laid off? I was shocked. I never imagined something like that happening to him. Yeah, I heard his company was struggling, but I didn't expect him to actually lose his job. My husband sank into a chair, clearly upset. I was just as shaken. My brother-in-law is so different from my husband. He's gentle, calm, and always respectful. He treats me kindly, often defending me when my husband makes harsh comments in front of our relatives. He'd say, "Bro, that's not fair to Emily," and never hesitates to apologize for his brother's rudeness. His wife is much like him, kind and thoughtful, and I had always admired them as a couple. Now, knowing he'd been laid off, I felt a growing desire to help. I wanted to support them, even if in some small way. Hey, isn't there something we can do to help? I asked my husband. He shot me a sharp look. What do you mean by that? Well, I hesitated. Maybe we can do something to make your brother feel a little better. I just thought. Before I could finish, my husband let out a heavy sigh. You really are hopeless. You don't understand anything about the real world, do you? You haven't been out there. He's going through the toughest time of his life right now, and you think some casual gesture from us will fix it. Outsiders should stay quiet. His words stung, and I was taken aback by the aggression in his tone. I had only wanted to help, but clearly, I had upset him. Outsider, I asked, almost pleading. Aren't I part of this family too? Family, he sneered. You're my wife, not my brother's family. You're an unrelated outsider. His words felt like a knife to the heart. I had never seen him this cold before. His brother's situation must have deeply affected him, but there were lines he crossed that shouldn't have been. Just don't do anything unnecessary, he snapped before storming out the door. From that moment on, he became even more oppressive toward me. Every little thing I did was met with criticism. What's with this meal? You should learn from my brother's wife. Or, what did you do all day? My brother's wife manages to keep herself tidy and run the household perfectly. His words weighed on me, and our home, once a quiet sanctuary, became a place where I felt like an outsider. He barked at me, his voice sharp and unreasonable. I had never seen him like this before. Enough. What on earth has happened to you? I finally snapped back at my husband. Shut up. Everything's a mess because of you, he blurted out, making no sense. I didn't even know where to start with him. Soon, we weren't even making eye contact, and the gap between us grew wider each day. I began to question our relationship. One morning, he started sorting through our belongings as if undertaking a thorough cleaning. He separated items into necessary and unnecessary, steadily filling garbage bags. I wondered what he was up to, but our relationship had become so cold that I didn't have the energy to ask. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke to me. Hey, what are you doing? You should start packing too, he said. Packing? For what? I asked, puzzled. We're moving out. I'm giving this house to my brother and his wife. What? What are you talking about? I was shocked to discover that he intended to give our home to his unemployed and struggling brother and sister-in-law. Wait a minute. Why are you doing this all of a sudden? Shut up. Don't defy me, he shouted, but I didn't back down. You said you wanted to do something for your brother, didn't you? I reminded him. That's a completely different issue. What are we supposed to do if we hand over the house? Where are we going to live? We'll figure that out later. My brother's in trouble right now, and as his elder brother, I need to help him. He was steering the conversation entirely on his own terms. To begin with, my brother-in-law was not the kind of person who would kick us out and move into someone else's house so brazenly. So why was this happening? As I gave my husband a suspicious look, he handed me something. If all you're going to do is talk back, you're of no use to me anymore. We're getting a divorce? Get out of here right now. He threw divorce papers at me, already filled out. I couldn't believe he was proposing divorce. Stunned by his unexpected move, I could only stand there. And yet, it felt strangely appropriate. I didn't feel like we could continue as a couple even if we stayed together. Maybe this is a good opportunity. I picked up the divorce papers that had fallen to the floor and without saying a word, signed them. My husband watched me with a smug, triumphant smile, his expression so ridiculous that I almost laughed. After finishing, I turned to him and said, "This house isn't yours, is it?" "Huh?" he muttered, confused. "This house is the one I lived in with my grandfather, and the land belonged to him too. They were both passed down to me, remember?" I said calmly. Now it was his turn to be stunned. "If the house is in my name, how exactly are you planning to hand it over?" I pressed, watching him scramble for words. No, I mean," he stammered, clearly flustered. "Did you forget?" I continued. "You moved into my house before we got married because you thought paying rent was a waste. I've been covering the property taxes on this house and land every year since they're in my name. You haven't contributed a penny." "Ah, well," he mumbled, realizing how cornered he was. "It doesn't matter anymore," I said coolly. "Once these papers are filed, our divorce will be finalized and we'll be strangers." Wait a minute. Let's calm down," he pleaded, his arrogance fading. "Calm down," I shot back. "That's my line. You're the one who threw divorce papers in my face like they meant nothing. How selfish can you be?" It's unbelievable. I couldn't hold back anymore. All the frustrations I had bottled up over the years came pouring out. I had loved this man, believed he loved me too. But maybe I had been wrong all along. I never thought our marriage would end like this. "Emily, wait, this is a misunderstanding. Let's talk," he begged. "Talk about what?" I said, my voice firm. "You were the one who brought up divorce first, weren't you?" "I've had enough." I carefully tucked away the signed divorce papers. "It's a holiday today, but I'll submit them first thing tomorrow morning." My husband sank to the floor, dazed. "No, this can't be happening," he muttered. I looked at him coldly without a shred of sympathy. "This is my house. Please leave immediately. Once the papers are filed, we'll be strangers, and I can't live under the same roof as a stranger." He grumbled and pleaded as he gathered his things, but I didn't waver. To me, he was already a stranger, and I felt no need to show him any mercy. Even when he cried and clung to me, it didn't stir a single emotion. Eventually, my husband left, resigned to his fate. Word of our divorce spread quickly at his company. He was immediately looked down upon at work. I heard rumors that the details of our split, and the way he treated me throughout our marriage, had spread widely. It seemed he had entirely lost his place there too. I couldn't help but wonder who started and spread the rumors. All I did was answer the questions his colleagues and subordinates asked me, nothing more. Then about 6 months after our divorce, I ran into someone I'd rather have avoided, my ex-husband. I had just left the real estate agency when I noticed him. It seemed he had been waiting, lying in wait for me to come out. The whole situation was unsettling, and even when I tried to ignore him, he persisted, following me until I finally lost my patience. "Enough. If you have something to say, just say it quickly," I snapped. "Emily, I've always despised you," he declared, leaving me completely baffled. Apparently, in his mind, he had been blaming me for everything, including his brother's layoff. "What? Why would that be my fault?" I asked, incredulous. "Ever since we got married, bad things just kept happening," he insisted. It was true that after our marriage, there were some unfortunate events, like his parents passing away and his injury, but his father had already been hospitalized long before we wed, and his mother had always been frail. As for his injury, that had been his own doing. He tripped over a curb while drunk and broke his wrist. But somehow, he had twisted these events into blaming me for all of it. "So, you think I was the cause of all your misfortunes, and that's why you hated me?" I asked, exasperated. I had always thought he was just a bit awkward, but to hear that he had secretly despised me was beyond frustrating. It was clear he never took responsibility for anything in his life, always blaming others for his troubles. I couldn't believe this was the same man who had once been a reliable supervisor at his company. I pitied his subordinates, imagining how they must have suffered under his leadership, unjustly criticized for things they hadn't done. It was pitiful that I had been married to someone like this. "And yet, even after divorcing me, bad things keep happening to you?" I asked. At my question, he rolled up his sleeves, revealing painful-looking burns. "My apartment burned down 3 months ago," he said, "but that's not all. I lost my wallet, I'm making mistakes at work, and now my brother is acting cold toward me. He hasn't contacted me in weeks." So, even after our divorce, his streak of misfortunes had continued. Unsurprisingly, I felt no sympathy for him. These were all consequences of his own actions, and I had nothing to do with them. Please, Emily, come back to me. I can't do this without you, he begged. We were together for so long, weren't we? Didn't I take care of things when you were working? And didn't I help you so much when your grandfather passed away? Hearing him try to guilt-trip me sent a chill down my spine. I had never felt so detached from him. All your misfortunes are because of your own actions. Maybe it's time you took a good look at yourself and stopped blaming everyone else for everything, I said, my voice cold and resolute. I turned and walked away from him, ignoring his desperate calls. Emily, wait, Emily. My ex-husband's voice faded as I disappeared into the crowd, pretending I didn't hear him. A week after our divorce, I got a call from my former brother-in-law. Emily, well, you're not my sister-in-law anymore, I guess. Sorry to bother you, but it's about my brother. He went on to explain that the decision to give up the house had been entirely my ex-husband's. Neither he nor his wife had any idea about it. My brother's always been prideful, and it's worried me for a long time. The way he treated you was awful. My wife and I felt terrible watching it all. He paused, then added, I don't know if it's okay to say this, but I think it's good you divorced him. You deserve to be happy, Emily. Thank you, I replied, touched by his words. He then told me that he had found a job shortly after the layoff and was managing to get by. I was genuinely happy for him. He mentioned he was thinking of distancing himself from his brother. It seemed my former brother-in-law had his own complicated feelings about the situation and intended to cut ties with my ex-husband. That explained why my ex-husband couldn't reach him. He was being slowly shut out of his own brother's life. Now, divorced and estranged from the brother he adored, my ex-husband was truly alone. I hoped he would realize the weight of his mistakes, but that was no longer my concern. My priority was to disappear from his life completely. The day I ran into him again, I had just signed a contract with a real estate agent to rent out the house I inherited from my grandfather. The house was too big for me to live in alone, but I couldn't bear to let go of all the memories I shared with my grandfather there. I preferred the idea of someone else living in it, someone who would appreciate the space as much as I did. I was ready to move on with my life. I changed my phone number, find a new place to live, and cut off all ties with my ex-husband. At 35, I knew I still had a long life ahead of me, and I was determined to